I swear, he's gonna say it or he might explode. Fine. Yeah, so If, otherwise known as Imaginary Friends, was written and directed by John Krasinski, otherwise known as Jim from The Office, the guy behind the Quiet Place movies. Here he is creating this whimsical family adventure. And we follow a young girl named Bee, played here by Cailey Fleming of Walking Dead fame, who embarks on a magical adventure to reconnect forgotten ifs with their kids after discovering that she can see everyone's imaginary friends. And wouldn't you know it, you have a gigantic cast of colorful characters, probably the most memorable of which is this grimace-looking guy. And even though he's purple, he's named Blue, and he's voiced by the ever-so-likable Steve Carell. Now, I know what you're thinking. This guy is purple, why is he named Blue? Well, this guy actually explains that his kid was colorblind, so hence Blue. That's actually pretty funny. Now, this movie, I swear to God, over the past 6 months or so at least, every single screening that I've gone to has had a trailer for If attached to it. So needless to say, there was a lot of hype going into this. And coming out of it, I would say that If is a cute movie. I don't want to say that it's the best movie of the year for sure. I know a lot of people came out of this really loving it, and honestly, looking at how the movie wraps up, it's easy to see why, but I don't think If comes without its flaws. But let's go ahead and start off with the positives, shall we? John Krasinski, as a director, I feel like struck gold when he did A Quiet Place all those years ago. And I think with If, John Krasinski proves that he is not a one-trick pony as a director. Because we know that he can create a suspenseful horror movie, and he's very effective at that. But who knew that he could create such a heartwarming, endearing, fantastical family adventure? And word on the street is that he was influenced by events from his childhood and stories that he heard when he was a kid. And I think that's really cool, and you can certainly see the passion that goes into If. Not just in the direction, but I think with how all these imaginary friends are designed, every single one of them is so freaking distinct. They're so freaking memorable. The only flip side to that is, If is only an hour 45 minutes or so. And this movie is trying to showcase so many of these things. And they get a lot of famous people to voice these characters, Emily Blunt and Matt Damon amongst those big names. And there's just not enough time to develop all these creatures. As cool as they look, I would have loved to have learned more about them. And what you get is extremely surface level, unfortunately. But I think this movie does well with creating a very whimsical style atmosphere. You know what this movie actually reminded me of? Do you remember when Steven Spielberg did The Big F***ing Giant all those years ago? And yes, I did call it The Big F***ing Giant, because how could you not? Mark Rylance was a big f***ing giant. But I mean, joking aside, this movie, If, gave me super similar vibes. I mean, even right down to Michael Giacchino's score, who, by the way, that guy is not capable of writing a bad score whatsoever. This score honestly kind of had me tearing up towards the end. I got close. I got very close. I didn't, though. And we'll get into why that is. But I think all the performers in here do really well. Not just the voice actors, but your leading characters. Cailey Fleming, a hell of a young performer. This honestly may be one of my favorite child performances that I've seen in a movie in quite some time. And I realize that she does play Judith in the later seasons of The Walking Dead. I never saw her, though. I stopped watching that show around season 7. My God, that cliffhanger at the end of season 6 pissed me off too much. And I just kind of got bored with the show, if I'm being honest. So I never saw Cailey Fleming do her work towards the tail end of that series. But man, her performance alone just makes me want to go back and finish everything. Like I said, she is one hell of a young performer, and she has so much emotional range to explore in this movie. And my God, she's up for the task. She was so damn good. John Krasinski also makes an appearance on the acting side, playing Cailey Fleming's father. I honestly saw a lot of myself in this guy, because he's very fun-loving, and even though he has a lot of bad things that are going on behind the scenes, not to say that I have any bad things going on in my life, but this guy likes to cope with comedy and fun. And that brings me to the movie's very effective message of you can't exactly have fun the rest of your life, but it's okay to have fun. Even though you're growing up and your age is getting up there, there's no limit to the fun that you can have. And I think that's a really sweet message for a movie to have in this day and age, especially at this point in my life. Now, with that in mind, I feel like my big issue with If revolves around this. why didn't John Krasinski as the father go on this adventure with this little girl? Because honestly, like, for the most part in this movie, when she was going on this adventure and it was Ryan Reynolds instead, this is not a knock on Ryan Reynolds at all, because obviously I love that man. But I'm just sitting there and I'm watching this little girl go on this journey with him and I'm like, why? Like, it's never fully explained until the ending hits you, and when that ending hits you, it all makes sense, but I was sitting there ultimately questioning why it wasn't the father. And I feel like the movie had a bit of a missed opportunity there. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not going to spoil anything about who Ryan Reynolds is or what his character is, even though you could probably guess who he is. Man, the fact that Ryan Reynolds wasn't this little girl's father, like, there was a lot of emotional detachment for me. Only until the plot twist happens and the reveal happens, which I'm like, okay, I see what you were trying to do. But for the most part, I was like, why should I care about this relationship between these two? And that's ultimately the bread and butter of any movie. You need to understand why you care about this guy from the get-go. And they sort of keep it a mystery why you should care about this guy until that final note hits. And I'm like, I don't know if that's the way I would have done it. But I will say, to his credit, this is the most subdued I've ever seen Ryan Reynolds in his entire career. It really did feel like the reins were on him. And honestly, bravo to Krasinski and bravo to Reynolds. Because honestly, there's a lot of improvisation that could have gone into this movie and the comedy would have been a little bit too overbearing. I'm glad they went about it this way. I'm glad that Ryan Reynolds at least has a bit of a different performance to his credit here. And I thought he was really solid in the movie. But I will say the show stealers are Cailey Fleming herself. And yeah, let's talk about Steve Carell. The reunion between Jim Halpert and Michael Scott in movie form is not what I would have expected, but Steve Carell, I think, is easily going to be the most memorable performance for at least the youngsters. And yeah, even as a 27-year-old man, I was still cracking up at this guy. Like, you're gonna see so much marketing involving Blue probably for many years to come. Heck, just as an example, to promote the release of this movie, I was at IHOP last night at the time of recording, and they actually have some special menu items dedicated to this movie, and specifically to Blue. So I have a feeling that we're going to be seeing this guy all over commercials for a long time. But overall, I mean, even though this isn't one of the strongest movies that I've seen so far this year, I do feel like the movie, for the most part, has some serious emotional detachment issues. I still think that all the characters that you come across are colorful and endearing enough, and your protagonist, played by Cailey Fleming, is just so easy to love and so easy to root for. I would say to that extent, If is at least worth one watch. I don't know if I'd say go to the theater to see this, but maybe if you have young ones and you're looking for a night in with them and you have it on like your streaming services, I'm sure it's going to be on Paramount Plus shortly after the digital copy releases. But I mean, if you're looking for a fun night in with your children, if they're curious to see this movie, and yeah, if they're curious for a day in, it's a hot summer, if you want to take them to the movie theater and this is what they pick, you're probably going to have at least a good time with it. I'm going to give If a B-. And I promise you, I wanted to really love this movie, but I feel like it didn't capitalize enough on the opportunities that were presented to it. But let me know what you think of Imaginary Friends down in the comments section below. And I don't know, this might be a weird question to wrap up on, but did you guys have any imaginary friends growing up? I don't know what other talking point to use. But I love discussing all new things in the movie world, guys. If you're looking for a great community of geeks, film lovers, and entertainment lovers, y'all are invited to join us. This is a great channel to become a part of. So do consider subscribing if you haven't already. Tap on that thumbs up as well. That would be a huge help. And stay tuned for more videos coming to the channel very soon. I'm looking forward to catching Furiosa next week. Summer blockbuster season is really heating up, guys. No pun intended. Y'all are the best. Thank you again for tuning into this video. And with all that being said, back talk, commence.